Hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that you're staying safe. Apologies in advance from me if I sound a little bit croaky. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment and sometimes my voice might be a little bit weird on this one. So bear with me if that is the case. Do apologise in advance. But here we are, back again. F1 2023 rolls back around with our third race of the season in Albert Park, Melbourne, Australia. One of my favourite races on the calendar. A street circuit maybe, but certainly not one by nature. It behaves a little bit more like a regular circuit. And of course, we had the changes to the circuit that we saw last season, which I think admittedly introduced a little bit more overtaking opportunities. And it was a little bit different, but I think we can all agree it did kind of work. How will it go down this weekend? Well, we'll certainly have to wait and see. Will Red Bull dominate the race in the same way that they've dominated the last two races? Will we get a bit of a championship battle going on between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez? Let's certainly hope so for the sake of the show. But speaking of shows, we're back as always with this preview. Joining me on the show, we've got Courtney Pine and Lee Wannerton in full force. I'm pretty sure feeling a little bit better than myself at the moment. But gentlemen, how are we doing? Lee, let's come to you first. How you doing, mate? All good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much, Adam. Really looking forward to this weekend, although I do feel for Daniel Ricciardo. I've just got something about it. It's just he's not going to score any points this weekend. It's really a shame to see that the Australian driver is not going to bring back those points.
Well, we can always hold out hope for Oscar Piastri, can't we?
I said that Australian driver, not the... Not
Oh, I thought you said the
them.
Australian driver. Right.
No,
That makes sense.
Okay, if I said the... sorry, I meant that Australian driver.
My hearing's going as well. It's not good. But yeah, I mean, we saw Danny Rick advertise a new crash helmet, which was actually quite nice. It was a little bit similar to Max Verstappen's. It had the honey badger symbol at the back, which obviously we know Daniel Ricciardo, we often use that nickname for him. It's a shame that we're not going to see him racing around Albert Park this weekend. Maybe a bit of a teaser of a free practice appearance in the future. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But yes, we still have one Australian in the pack. However, that's going to be Oscar Piastri this weekend. Courtney, how are you doing, mate? You all good?
Yeah, doing well. Can't complain. With the Aussie situation, I suppose I'll say qualifying could be interesting. We saw Oscar Piastri put in a good qualifying performance. That might get the crowd going. But I don't know about you two, but I really miss having Australia as the first race of the season. I remember just, the brand new cars flying around this high speed circuit. Weather's usually beautiful. And you'd wake up blurry-eyed 6 o'clock in the morning and you see these brand new cars going around high speed. And I used to love it. So I'm hoping they do a reshuffle again one day and put Melbourne at the start again.
Yeah, I always liked seeing Albert Park as the first race of the season. It always felt like a first race venue. That said, I have gotten quite used to Bahrain being the opening race of the season. And given that we have testing there, it kind of makes sense to have it there. Guys, as always, if you want to support the show, you know what to do. You can like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are new. And of course, if you listen to us on your favourite podcasting platform, make sure to give us a nice 5-star review if you think that we are worthy. We'll give you a shout out on the next episode if you are so kind to help us out. Of course, we gave one to our friend Dave on the last episode for giving us a 5-star review. So thank you once again, Dave. If you haven't checked that out, we did a nice Q&A during the interlude period to answer some of your questions. I think it went quite well. You guys seem to enjoy it. We might do another one in a few other interludes this season. But coming back, guys, coming into this race, Red Bull winning both races so far, dominating at the moment. It's been a while, admittedly, since they won the Australian Grand Prix. I think, if my memory serves, it was 2011 since Red Bull won at Albert Park last. Sebastian Vettel, a long time ago. Of course, he's not racing in F1 anymore, sadly. So it's well overdue for Red Bull, despite being the heavy favourites. I suppose the big story has to be, guys, Max Verstappen against Sergio Perez. Now, we saw in Bahrain, Max had the entire field covered off. He looked completely comfortable, as did Sergio Perez. Red Bull in a league of their own. In Jeddah, however, Max Verstappen having some reliability concerns. This could be an issue that could plague Red Bull throughout the season. We'll have to wait and see how that transpires. But the issue in qualifying was enough to give Perez an advantage, which he never really relinquished. Despite that, however, there was a little bit of discussion, I suppose, that needed to be had between Perez and the team after he found out that Max Verstappen not so much breached, but went against the protocol of maintaining the pace of his teammate to go and do a fastest lap to maintain his championship lead at the very last moment. I suppose it sets it up quite nicely, gentlemen, where we have both Red Bull drivers. We have the two-time world champion Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez's teammate, starting the season well, will be looking to try and use his momentum that he's found, this new form, if you like, to try and lay down a marker and perhaps start a championship challenge of his own. Realistically speaking, guys, how do we see this going down between Checo and Max? Does Checo have a fighting chance of taking the fight to his teammate this weekend and, by extension, the championship?
I suppose I say that Sergio Perez has more of a chance this season, given that Red Bull are so strong. We saw in the early stages of Lewis against Nico Rosberg, I do feel that Nico improved as the seasons went by. But in 2014 in particular, Nico's in with a chance, because if the other car or the other drivers are having a few off days, if the car's having more problems, then obviously by virtue that puts him into the championship battle. So that's probably Sergio's bigger chance. But I'm going to go back to the original point, Adam, that you made about, Max Verstappen taking the point off Sergio. And I do feel that that's a part of Max Verstappen. Look, I'm not saying this is right, by the way. I'm just explaining the mindset that Max has. And I do feel that it's that kind of DNA that sort of makes him stand out along with the other champions we've seen in the past. And there's been so much talk about Max Verstappen over the last 2-3 years, and he divides opinion. But I would like to say that all of the other great champions also divided opinion. If you have a look at Hamilton, Schumacher, even look back further like Alonso, Senna, Prost, all these guys divided opinions. They weren't liked by everybody. And it's because they made these kind of small decisions, like taking the fastest lap away, thinking that point could make a difference at the end of the season. And I feel it's those kind of things, whether people like it or not, it's that kind of mindset that separates Max from the, shall we say, the good drivers. But you're talking a multiple world champion kind of mentality.
I think the word that we heard quite a lot this week on that, I think it was Scott Mitchell-Malm that talked about this, the race journalist, called it individualism. And it wasn't intended to imply that Max is only in it for himself or he only cares about one thing. That's not the case. And I actually admire this about Max Verstappen, that relentlessness, that ruthlessness he has behind the wheel to make sure he maximizes every opportunity possible and also make sure that damage limitation is implied. Now, the way he was driving in Jeddah, he was definitely driving almost with one hand behind his back in terms of the car's status. There was an issue that they were managing, the drive shaft issue that plagued him in qualifying. There were fears that this was creeping up again, and Max was still trying to extract the most performance as possible. In the landscape of a championship battle against his teammate, who arguably is going to be his strictest competition this year, you feel that Max Verstappen has this amazing ability to be able to make sure that he can take a situation and deliver the absolute most that he can. And I think sometimes, perhaps Sergio Perez has admittedly given Max a little bit more credit than he's due, or a little bit more respect, I think is a better way of putting it, to the point where I think right now, we know what Max is going to do. We know if Max sniffs an opportunity to try and get an advantage, he will absolutely take it. It's what all the greats do. It's what Hamilton has done. It's what Schumacher's done. It's what Senna, Prost, Fangio, Lauda, all the greats have done in their career. If Sergio Perez wants to beat Max Verstappen, he has to play him at his own game. Now, I'm not suggesting...
That's what Rosberg did.
Yeah, exactly. It's what Rosberg did with Hamilton.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting here that Checo needs to try and replicate what happened in Monaco. Not implying that Checo did it on purpose, of course. I'm one of the people that feel that was just an unfortunate accident that was misconstrued by the Verstappen camp in this regard. Because it wouldn't have made sense for Checo to do it on purpose, considering where they were in qualifying. But that's another story for another day. I just feel right now that Checo needs to take on board what happened in Jeddah, what happened last season, and if he really wants to win this championship, he has to think about himself. he can't, to a point where he probably can't even trust his team to say that Max is going to stick to the race pace, because Red Bull will try to manage this, but they won't succeed, because Max will do what he wants to do. Checo needs to do what he wants to do. At the end of the day, as long as they both finish and score the big points, that's all Red Bull really need to ask of them. It's up to them to sort themselves out. And we know Max is going to do this because he's won it 2 world championships being ruthless. Checo needs to do that. I haven't seen Checo do that yet. I want to see that from him going forward this season. If he can do that and continue to pick up the form as he has been, we could have a very exciting championship battle. Lee, has come to you on this one, because I know you've said to me in the past that you don't feel Checo, and not to put words in your mouth, you don't feel that Checo shows enough ruthlessness either. Sometimes he's a bit of a nice guy, he's a bit friendly. Having seen what he saw in Jeddah and everything that transpired towards the end of last season, how do you feel about the possibility of Checo now deciding to just go it himself and make sure that he's the first priority in this championship for himself, if that makes sense?
Well, I definitely feel that he should have learned his lesson now. I mean, in the sense of what happened in the last season in Brazil, and what happened in Jeddah, that Red Bull tried to get Max to stick to the lap delta, told him not to go to the fastest lap, and Max did what Max wanted. Sergio's out of contract at the end of this season, so he knows, as it stands, this is his last chance to win a world championship. And he now knows that Max will ignore the team. So I want to, as you said, I want to see Sergio go, I'm going to ignore the team. I'm going to do what works for me. I'm going to do the fastest lap in the last lap of the race. So you're going to see bonsai laps from both of them now to try and get the fastest lap in the last lap of the race, which will they crash on the last lap of the race because they're trying to get the fastest time? Well, that's going to be interesting if Max or Sergio bin it on the last lap because they're trying to get the fastest lap. So it adds this whole dynamic on to the team relationship. And it's just an extension from last year that it's going to go downhill as a relationship between them. You remember in the end of 21, I'm paraphrasing, but Max is like, Sergio's the best teammate ever. He's done wonders. I'm sure Max isn't thinking about Sergio now. He's in the way. He's winning races. He's got a pole position. That's so annoying. That's really inconvenient for me. And Sergio needs to be inconvenient to beat Max because that's the only way he's going to win that world title. I mean, Red Bull could go, sorry, we're not what you're looking for. Adios, Sergio, and we're going to promote Danny Rick back into the main driver's seat. So Sergio needs to go out if he wants to win the world championship this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we can put it down to one question that you could ask Sergio Perez, I think, in my opinion, you look at the Mercedes situation over the last 5-6 years, and you have to ask Checo Perez, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be Bottas, have a safe, secure seat, always be in number 2, never quite being able to win that championship? And to be fair to Valtteri Bottas, it was a formidable task to topple Hamilton, but would you rather be that, or would you rather be Rosberg? Take it to Lewis. If you believe you're good enough to beat Max in the same car, this is the time to prove it. Because there will come a time where Checo will reflect on his career, and he may look back to this season, if he doesn't really try to win this championship, think to himself, I really could have gone for that. I really wish I'd have put more in, or not so much ruffle some feathers, but really take it to Max in a season where I could have been a world champion. Which one would you rather be, really, is the question.
No, it is. It's a great question to be asked. And I think the Bottas and the Barrichello one as well, because you ever look at some of like the other drivers as well, that were likable, like Danny Rick. I feel that Danny Rick sort of got out of Red Bull because he saw that Max Verstappen was obviously going to be the star boy. But I just feel that, being that likable guy, you can sometimes lose that ruthlessness. I've referred to this before with Lando Norris. Lando Norris has improved in that sense, but I just felt that Lando Norris was way too likable to be a world champion. You have a look at George Russell. Even George Russell now, you've seen a more ruthless side to George Russell, which is, you're getting a talk now. He's upsetting Lewis and all that, but that's because you have to have that ruthlessness if you want to be a world champion. And going back to Sergio Perez, let's be honest, we know he has a pace deficit to Max Verstappen, particularly at this point. He has to take these opportunities. So like last time, Max Verstappen had an off weekend. Not only did he have reliability issues, we also know he was sick on the build up to the weekend. You have to take those opportunities when you get them, when you know that on raw pace, you're behind your teammate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the dynamic as well that helps Perez in this situation is last season, Max signed a long-term contract, which is going to take him up till he's 31. It was like a 7 or 8 year deal. And he's getting paid mega money. He's at the best team right now. He's got the best car underneath him. As long as Checo does this in a way where he can show Red Bull that he's competitive and then it's a mistake to get rid of him, even if he loses out to Max in this championship, there's no way that Perez is going to upset the balance of the team so much where it's going to risk Max leaving the team. I mean, where's Max going to go?
Yeah.
He's not going to want to go anywhere else. So, I do think this is a great opportunity for Checo. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. It's going to be really interesting. And I think a lot of us, unless you're a Max Verstappen fan, are hoping that Sergio Perez really does make a fight out of this championship. I think it's what we all want to see. And we'll have to wait and see how it goes down. Incidentally, on Red Bull, I forgot to talk about this a couple of weeks ago, but I'm going to bring it up because someone actually sent a question into us. And I think it was Leslie Davis, I think it was, who sent an email to me. And she said, "Oh, hi, DNF1, love the show. You haven't talked about the story of the Red Bull RB18 sim rig." Now, I don't know if anyone, you guys listening may have heard what we're talking about here. Basically, I think, if I remember rightly, Red Bull partnered with sports memorabilia specialist Memento Exclusives to make a very special sim rig, which is basically people that play the F1 game or other racing games have a bit of a setup going on there. And I'll have to try and put a picture in this somewhere, but the front of it is basically a model replica of the RB18 surrounding the setup. And it looks amazing until you look at the price tag. About £100,000 or £99,999. I don't know if this includes the TV. That's the Champions Edition, by the way. There's a regular one, a race edition. I'm not sure what the difference is, for about 75k. And they were asking me, are you guys planning to get one anytime soon? Well, Leslie, unfortunately, I'm not lucky enough to have £100,000 just sitting around. If I had that kind of money, I think you'd all agree I'd have a much better setup going on than the one I got right now in terms of podcasting setups. But if anyone's got a spare 100k lying around and they want to feel generous, or actually no, 300k, because I think it's only fair for one for each of us. Sorry, Courtney.
I wonder if Toto Wolff and Fred Purcell would be interested in buying some of those parts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if maybe this is Red Bull trying to recoup money on the cost cap. I'm not sure that's quite how it works. But yeah, if anyone's got 300k lying around and they fancy treating us all to a Red Bull RB18 sim, I'm game. I might paint it red afterwards. But yeah, and you guys probably could paint it black or silver, so we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I thought it looked pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. If you had that kind of money, you probably would flex it and get it. So I did see the other day as well, Max Verstappen, when he does his iRacing vids. And I can't remember what race he was doing it, but on his desk table, he had the World Drivers' Championship trophy just sitting there. I mean, that's a flex. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't think many people can say that they've ever done that before. So, no, that was pretty cool for Max. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it gets on this weekend. And I thought it was quite cool. I thought I'd share that, seeing as someone prompted me very kindly of them. Let's move on to the next talking point. And in the news, we heard a story about Stefano Domenicali, the F1 CEO, talking about free practice, and more specifically, the potential to get rid of Friday practice. Now, this was quoted from an article from FormulaNerds.com, obviously redirected from F1. Stefano was quoted as saying, "I am a supporter of the cancellation of free practice sessions, which are of great use to the engineers, but that the public doesn't like." Now, that's quite interesting. We also had Sam Cooper from Planet F1, our friend Sam, saying that these comments were actually taken out of context and that currently they have no intention of scrapping free practice sessions on the Friday. There has been a lot of talk about moving F1 to a 2-day race weekend where it's just more action and less practice time, I suppose, to try and spice up the action. I mean, what do you guys make of that? Would you be in favour of scrapping Friday practice altogether and just having everything on a Saturday and Sunday? What are your thoughts, guys? Courtney seems to be quite deep in thought on this one.
Yeah, look, I just feel that the practice sessions are a big part of the DNA of the sport. Of course, it's important for the engineers for, to get the setup sorted, to actually iron out some of the gremlins that could well be, within the cars. I do feel you'll be getting more reliability issues, which some would find more entertaining. But for me, you're just taking away a part of the DNA of the sport. There are big concerns, over the last 2-3 years that, they're trying to make F1, more of a spectacle rather than a sport. And look, as fans of the sport, we love it for what it is. We know there's room for improvement, but I personally feel that the priorities are all wrong when you're hearing statements like this. Look, obviously it could well have been taken out of context, but during a time where fans are very frustrated about the direction of the sport's heading in, I feel they need to be looking at the stewarding. The stewarding is probably the biggest issue facing the sport. It's made the sport become a bit of a circus. I know there's a lot of casual fans that have lost interest in the sport because of the way that it's basically watched over. For me, I think it's shambolic at the moment. I also have big issues. I don't know if they would be able to do much about the one about the race. I feel that F1 started to become a lot more tribal and, similar to football in that regard. And when I first got into F1 about, 20 years ago, I found it refreshing because in football, as much as I love the sport, I do hate some of the nastiness that come with it at times. And I feel that F1 slowly but surely is heading into that kind of realm. And it'd be a real shame if it was a get out. It wasn't be able to recover itself, stuck in a pit the way that football is. So I feel there are much bigger issues facing F1 right now than the practice sessions.
What do you reckon, Lee? Are you a fan of this idea of potentially getting rid of practice sessions, or do you feel that the F1 engineers should have the priority in terms of how much time they're allowed to make sure that the cars are all tuned up, really, for the race weekend?
Well, if you think about it, when we don't have a practice session, normally because it's been rained out, we have a really unpredictable race. The order is that we have a messed up grid. The race is complete chaos, not by safety car chaos, but because there's so many cars out of position or not delivering the performance, and it really makes it entertaining, which is obviously what Courtney was touching on regarding the entertainment aspect and more the racing aspect. So I can understand from an entertainment perspective why they may want to limit the performance. But I do agree with Courtney regarding the fan aspect. That, like, the three of us, when we get through practice and we talk about the results, and where this cars? Oh, that's really interesting that the car's done that. They delivered that lap time. Oh, what tires with? And for us, we spend maybe not a lot of time, but we overview how the practice is going. Sometimes, if we're free, we maybe even watch it. I know I occasionally watch it if I'm sitting around not doing anything on a Friday. And we talk about how it's been on work show for the weekend or for the race or the qualifying. Yeah. All right, if the casual fan may not go into that, I admit, but for the three of us, we pay attention to the practice. So I feel that's a loss for me personally. But the Mercalli's, I'll give it a free practice. And I made a joke to you on the chat about, what they're going to bring in. You got this F1 sprint race, you bring F1 drag race, F1 monster rally, F1 dirt rally. Well, come on, that makes it all entertaining if you have 5 different categories. I think it's a bit silly. I mean, personally, I know they were silly examples, but I was just trying to make a point.
No, I hear you. And it's funny, when I think about this free practice situation, obviously Friday is the day where everybody's talking about, do we really need to have Friday practice? I remember Mike Caulfield, the former Haas and Mercedes race engineer, coming on the show to talk about this, and he always felt a good solution would be to have the practice sessions, qualifying, and the race on Saturday and Sunday. And then, of course, you've got Friday as like an open day for fans that want to come into the paddock within reason and obviously get a good view of the teams setting up the cars and everything else that come with it. Have a bit of a spectacle that comes with it. Yeah, you can have some running, I suppose, later in the day or stuff like that, but something a little bit more informal. And, gives the engineers and mechanics a little bit more time to get everything sorted until the track running is done on the Saturday and the Sunday, and obviously it would be a bit easier on the cost cap because you wouldn't need to do as much running. I then also think about 2018, the US Grand Prix, where we had free practice all on Saturday was completely washed out. I think we hardly had any practice at all on the Saturday morning, and we had qualifying, and it served up to create a very good race where Kimi managed to make a one-stop work, I think it was, on a track that's very abrasive on the tyres, and he won over Lewis and Max, who were on two stoppers, and he created some really good racing. So I can understand the logic behind it. I am a big fan of the idea of perhaps if we could condense everything over the 2 days, I think that could work. I don't think we need 3 practice sessions over the weekend. I think sprint weekends have proven to all of us that F1 only really needs 2 practice sessions. If anything, FP3 is a glorified qualifying simulation. And sometimes I prefer not to have that because I think I like a little bit of jeopardy or unknown in terms of qualifying, which makes the challenge of getting that one lap together even harder than it currently already is. I like that. I think that would spice things up a little bit. So would have to wait and see how things go on this one. But I think that's a good question to put out to you guys listening on this. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening in, let us know on our YouTube channel in the comment section. Should they bin off Friday practice, or should they just get rid of free practice free and have everything on Saturday and Sunday? Let me know. Courtney, you wanted to weigh in on this one. I could see you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I had no idea come to my head, and obviously it's a raw fault, so it could well be flawed. Why don't they give the junior categories more airtime on a Friday? Because I know there is growing interest in F2 and F3. Why not give them more of the stage on a Friday rather than being like more of a side event on a Saturday and a Sunday? I reckon like if those to make the F2 feature race on a Friday, I do think that would help, give more exposure to some of these younger drivers coming through.
I think the only reason why they don't have the feature race on the same day as like the sprint race, because they have the sprint on Saturday, the feature on the Sunday. I think the reason why they do that is because if someone bins it in a wall, the mechanics need time to sort that all out. They can't really have too much running on the same day. So I think it's not a bad idea. It is possible, but they do the feature as like the warm up for the race on Sunday, the sprint on Saturday. So I get the logic. As I said, I think if you could fit it all onto 2 days, then that's great. I think sprint weekends prove that it is possible to a degree, that you don't necessarily need all that practice time. And I do like the idea of a little bit of unknown. Teams and drivers and engineers will always say, oh, we need more time to tune this. We need more of this, more of this, more of this. I think the solution to this is perhaps, take away free practice free, have it all on Saturday and Sunday and see how it goes. And Friday can be like as Mike Caulfield said on the show when he came on, a bit of a day for the fans where they can see the cars and stuff like that. Free admission, if people want to come, within reason, you've got to control it. And see how it goes. I don't think that'd be best for business, but I never really argue a case for the business. I always argue from the perspective of the fans or what they'd probably want to see, at least in my opinion anyway. So let us know your thoughts, guys. What would you like to see? Would you like free practice to be removed on Friday and have it all on Saturday and Sunday, or would you rather leave things as they are? Or if you've got anything else you want to suggest, let me know. Let's move on to the battle behind Red Bull this weekend, usually for the final podium spot. Aston Martin and specifically Fernando Alonso has gotten out on both occasions, although unfortunately for us, that was sort of reshuffled around back and forth where it was, then it wasn't, and then it was again. Fernando got the podium in the end. So back-to-back 100 podiums for Fernando Alonso in his F1 career, so congratulations to him. Going into this weekend, guys, are Aston Martin, in particular Fernando Alonso, the favourites to finish on the podium again ahead of the rest?
Yeah, I can't see why. Lee?
No, go on. You finish your statement, Courtney.
Yeah, look, I know I can talk a lot. But yeah, I can't see why Fernando wouldn't finish it. It does seem that Aston Martin are in a league of their own at the moment. I do personally feel that Mercedes and Ferrari will close the gap on Aston Martin. But up until Imola, at least, I do feel that Aston Martin have that final podium. Obviously, barring any kind of disasters for Aston Martin and Red Bull, you'd have to feel Aston Martin have that first spot covered.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a different test this weekend to what we've seen in Bahrain and Jeddah. We saw Bahrain have a variety of different speeds of corners and different levels of downforce required in different areas, and the Aston Martin looked very, very good. It was the second fastest car on that day in the race. In Jeddah, it was a different challenge, one where we expected Mercedes and in particular Ferrari to be a little bit more competitive, as it was. Fernando's P3 never really looked in doubt, other than that moment where we thought it was taken away from him. we're going to have another new challenge at a circuit which has a nice blend of slow corners and some high-speed straights and, high-speed turns as well. So on the balance of things, you would argue that this track might be a little bit similar to what we saw in Bahrain, just not as abrasive. So perhaps Aston Martin, rather than hoping they might get a podium, they might be expecting it this weekend, given the pace that they seem to have, especially in Fernando's hands. So what about Lance Stroll in all of this? Because he looked good in Bahrain despite his injuries. He seemed a bit fresher, looked good in the opening stint of the race in Jeddah. And he's going to improve even more, assuming the reliability of the car is going to be able to match, which unfortunately for him, it wasn't. So, where's he going to fit in all this? Could he put himself in the mix for a podium this weekend as well?
I can't see why not, but I do feel that Fernando has Lance covered. Obviously, Lance has had his issues in pre-season, so he could catch up. But generally speaking, you expect Fernando to have the edge over him.
Lee, on the topic of Aston Martin, of course, over the season, there's obviously going to be questions raised about how good they can be in a development race against Mercedes and Ferrari. Forget Red Bull for the time being, because they are out of touch in a league of their own right now. Aston Martin seem relatively confident that they can maintain the advantage that they seemingly have right now, at least in race pace, over Mercedes and Ferrari. They do, for the time being, have the extra development time for the first few months of the season until that reset, assuming that they're in P2 at this point in time. How confident do you feel that they can maintain their form and still be the best of the rest later on this season when we get to the sharp end, and perhaps they might be thinking, actually, P2 is definitely on the cards for us?
I admit, personally, I'm not very convinced that they will be able to maintain a development race. And I say that for two reasons. Firstly, Ferrari constantly say they can maintain a development race across the season. But we've seen from the last few years, they can't. They don't have the development turnout to keep up with, using Mercedes and Red Bull's examples here, to keep up with them in the development race. We saw it last year, how Mercedes closed the gap, especially to Ferrari, towards the end of the season from where they started the season. And I don't think Aston Martin would be in the position that they're in as a team that's used to midfield development, fighting with the big boys, so to speak, who don't have the experience of a sharp end of the grid development race. And I don't think they'll be able to keep up with Mercedes and even potentially Ferrari in a development race, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, we can," and then they'll start off, and then actually they're going to close the gap, and then they start panic, and then it's like by the end of the season, it's like, "Oh, we're the full fastest." Well, that went well. So there's that, and I just alluded to it is their lack of experience. They've been a midfield team, operationally a midfield team. They've hired people from the top teams, yes, but as we know, hiring people from the top team doesn't bring the experience to the staff that haven't been in the top team. You go, "Oh, this is how we do it here. This is how we maintain. This is how much pieces we churn out. This is how." But if you don't have the experience to fall back on as members of staff fighting for the top end, they're not going to be able to bring on that. And they may keep up for part of the season, but fall behind, as I already suggested they will. And then maybe next year they have a better development rate. But that's a learning process. That's not, we just switch it on and we all develop straight away like Red Bull and Mercedes. And so I don't think they're going to be able to maintain a development race over the course of the season.
I think there's an element in this that does go in Aston Martin's favour. And it's the fact that Mercedes and Ferrari right now aren't 100% convinced that the concept car that they have right now is going to be the one that they'll want to pursue going forward from 2024 onwards. There's going to come to a point this season in the championship where I believe, because Aston Martin have already gone down that Red Bull route and they've already made it work to the point where they've got ahead of Ferrari and Mercedes, they could be best placed to be the team to try and catch Red Bull at this point in time. That gives them an advantage, as Red Bull have proven that there's more speed in this concept than Aston Martin have unlocked yet, and certainly more at this point in time than what Ferrari and Mercedes are able to unlock with their own. So there is a point in time in this project where if Mercedes and Ferrari can't not only catch Aston Martin in the short term, with the disadvantage in less development time that they currently have, and overhaul them to the point where they know they're not going to get them before the end of the season, I think Aston Martin could have them in that regard, because attention will have to switch from Ferrari and Mercedes if they're both convinced that they need to invest in 2024. It gets to a point where Ferrari and Mercedes say, look, we got it wrong. We're not going to get P1. We're definitely not going to get P2 at this point. We just have to give it up and hope that we can invest for 2024 with the ambition where they're not even going to have to worry about Aston Martin, with all due respect. They're going to try and challenge Red Bull. So there is an opportunity for Aston Martin with the route they've currently gone down right now at this point in time.
Adam, I'm going to differ to an extent on this one. I'm going to separate Ferrari and Mercedes. As we've seen over the last couple of seasons, Ferrari tend to struggle with a development battle throughout the course of a season. But if you have a look at Mercedes in 2020, not only last season, but also 2021, they start off sleepwalking a little bit. And generally speaking, they actually make quite decent gains. You have a look at Mercedes last season. I know it was only one race and Red Bull had an off day, but they developed a race-winning car after being sort of seen as the laughing stock of the grid. They made some big gains last season, and I do feel that if anybody is going to topple Aston Martin this season, it will be Mercedes. And also with Ferrari, there's still a lot of unknowns with this car, and I'm hoping that we get a close battle with Ferrari, Mercedes, and Aston Martin, because I want to be seeing more Alonso against Leclerc, and obviously let's not forget Alonso against George Russell as well. So let's let that catch up and we can get some entertaining battles.
No Alonso Stroll?
Well,
yeah. If that gets snorted, that's going to get really annoying. I said that in pre-season.
I mean, that is something that has the potential to derail the progress that Aston Martin has made. You know, with all due respect, Lance Stroll and even Fernando Alonso to some degree have not had the best track record of being respectful at racing their teammate or knowing when to let things go or to when to fight. So that does have the potential. Aston Martin probably aren't worried about it now because they probably feel that with respect to Stroll, Alonso does have him covered in terms of ultimate pace. But Stroll is in the mix with the Ferraris and the Mercs. So he definitely has the pace. And now that he's got a car that is very, very quick, we might see the best of Lance Stroll. You know, when he's had a good car underneath him, he has performed relatively well, contrary to what some people may say about him. So there's definitely a good driver in there. Be certainly a problem that Aston Martin will hope to avoid. We'll have to wait and see. One piece of news this weekend that should delight Fernando Alonso fans and even Esteban Ocon fans. F1 has made a commitment, according to Andy Haupt from AMUS in Germany. F1 has made a commitment to increase the width of the starting grid boxes by 20 centimetres or 8 inches or just over half a foot for anyone not familiar with the metric system from this weekend onwards. This should help prevent a repeat of the issues Ocon and Alonso had in the first two rounds. So, I mean, that's good news in some degree. The grid boxes are going to be wider. I think that kind of makes sense because these cars are certainly bigger than they have been for many, many years now. We're talking decades since they were as wide as they are right now. I don't think Alonso's issue was the fact that the car was too wide. I think it was more the fact that Alonso wanted to try and squeeze Checo in as much as possible and he got caught out for it. Ocon had just overran the grid box. He'd gone too far. So, not really addressing the main issue, but I think it's a welcome change nonetheless, guys.
Yeah, it's certainly a good move because I personally like it when you see, particularly on the front row, when you see one of the drivers at an angle, you're like, oi, what are you playing at here? Always used to enjoy seeing that. So I'm hoping that with these larger grid slots, we'll be seeing more of that because it does. It's that one. It just a little bit of extra spice as you're waiting for those red lights to go out.
A little bit. We used to see that a lot in the older days when the cars were much smaller. I used to remember, funny enough, I think the worst one of doing this, ironically, was Michael Schumacher. And he used to take liberties with this in the Ferrari days where he'd be on pole position and when he was fighting Hakkinen or Alonso, he'd arrow his car to the point where he's literally aiming for the car in P2 even though he's ahead of them. Somehow, Michael was never the best at getting starts anyway, so somehow he'd still get a bad start, have to readjust his car position rather than dart over. So it will be quite interesting to see how that goes. I always remember Seb a couple of years ago in the Ferrari in Shanghai, when he took liberties with that. I mean, he was literally trying to park in Hamilton's spot, let alone halfway up across his own. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see if anybody takes liberties with these spaces. I'm pretty sure someone's going to push the boundaries, but...
Fernando.
Yeah, probably Fernando. Yeah, he probably will. It'd be interesting to see if anyone gets penalised for the third race in a row for a breach of grid positioning. So, well, let's see. Another rumour we should address as well that came up in the F1 newsreel this weekend regarding Red Bull designer Adrian Newey, or at least hired with the team on an interim basis, the legendary designer himself, his contract with the team is rumoured to be expiring soon. Tom Clarkson on the F1 Nation podcast did talk about this story. It is quite interesting. I don't think Red Bull fans should be worried right now that Adrian Newey might leave them to go to another team. But there have been links in the past with Adrian Newey and Aston Martin, particularly as a designer on the Valkyrie project, which he was doing when Aston Martin had a partnership with Red Bull before they become a team in F1. There was also, I think I remember this rightly, he had a stake or shares in Red Bull Aston Martin Technologies. I don't know if he still has that or not, so that might create either a conflict of interest or a route in, or a segue, if you like. It's quite an interesting story. As I said, I don't suspect anytime soon that Adrian Newey is going to jump ship to leave Red Bull to go to Aston Martin in the same way that Dan Fallows did. But there's always the worry that with Aston Martin's increasing project, Adrian Newey might be looking for a new project. I mean, that would be quite a coup. You know, let's humour the idea that it happens. I mean, that's possibly the missing piece of the jigsaw for Aston Martin's project in terms of having all the right personnel and facilities in to turn Lawrence Stroll's project into a dynasty in the same way that Mercedes did many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, if any team on the grid was going to somehow convince Adrian Newey from Red Bull, I would have said it's Aston Martin. He's not interested in Mercedes or Ferrari, especially Ferrari's had the opportunity in the past to join them, and he declined it. Aston Martin is that, I say bogey team, but it's not a bogey team, but it's that unique team where it's being well funded, it's growing, similar in stature to how Red Bull was when Adrian Newey joined it back in the early noughties. And it's that situation which I think he enjoys the most, of not being a corporate behemoth and everything that come with it, which is one of the reasons why he turned down Ferrari, plus being in Italy. But being it's a UK-based team, and it could be an opportunity to consider. And obviously, Lawrence has the money to throw at him because obviously it's not part of the budget cap. He works as a contractor through his own business. I mean, it definitely would be something I'm sure is on Lawrence's radar to start some preliminary discussions. Even if Adrian turns it down, Lawrence will already be there sniffing around or having some people trying to reach out to Adrian Newey just to get that started. He's not stupid.
Yeah, I can imagine a scenario where every time he leaves work, Adrian Newey, Lawrence Stroll just follows him home every day just to try and get him to come. Like, how much will it cost? Or I don't think money's an object really for Adrian Newey or anything like that. I really don't think he's incentivized by money at all. I mean, you know, the guy's loaded. He's done so much in F1 that, you know, he's the most... It's amazing how, you know, he's done so many great things in terms of car design in F1 to the point where he's left and come back so many times now because of how good he is at what he does. You know, I think we really have to appreciate the genius behind the man. It is going to be interesting to see how things turn out. As I said already, we don't know, and we've certainly not heard any concrete evidence to suggest that he's not going to be working with Red Bull or, you know, in the near future. As we said, he was hired externally on an interim basis. I think this was Red Bull's ploy to try and remove his salary or remove his fee from their cost cap, which didn't exactly go the way that they would have hoped on this one. So we'll have to wait and see. Quite an intriguing story. It would be incredible if Aston Martin was to take Adrian Newey on away from Red Bull. It would almost complete, if you like, that merry-go-round of team personnel shifting, you know, from Ferrari to Mercedes, Mercedes to Red Bull. Red Bull been poaching a lot of Mercedes people over the years. Now we're seeing Aston Martin poaching a lot of Red Bull people over the years, and Mercedes as well, with all due respect. So would be quite a route to success for Aston Martin. We'll have to wait and see. Let's move on. We have got some other stories to cover in this one. We don't want to drag on forever. Let's talk about Ferrari and Mercedes, guys. How are they going to perform this weekend? Because very similar, yet different problems from both teams. Mercedes seem to have very little confidence in the concept that they have, to the point where Toto Wolff believes they're 6 to 12 months behind Red Bull and that perhaps a new shift in concept is the best solution for them. We also had Mike Elliott recently saying that he's going to be hopeful that the upgrades coming on the car in Imola, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, are going to close the deficit and revitalise their championship. Ferrari, on the other hand, seem to have a different issue where they seem to be quite confident with the concept of their car, they just can't seem to unlock that performance, or at least mimic or correlate the performance on the track in the same way that the numbers showed up on the simulator. So how do we see these guys going this weekend?
Leclerc DNFing because of engine reliability.
I wish I could disagree with you, mate, but we haven't even mentioned the reliability issue yet, but we might as well go there since you mentioned it. But do go on, stick the knife in even deeper, mate.
Sainz having a pit stop issue. Come on, I mean, it's Ferrari. Why not? I know we're not doing predictions, but
well, I mean, Sainz has not really had many problems with the
car. Oh, I know.
So he's just not been up to pace yet. I mean, he had a terrible race last year, didn't he? So binned it on lap 2, didn't he? So hopefully he has a better one. But yes, do go on. Add more misery to me and the Tifosi.
Yeah, it's about time that he got some Ferrari bad luck. So he's going to bad pit stop, bad strategy, reliability, and Charles just gets it all. So it's, I mean, that's, you want to know how Ferrari's weekend is going to go. Yeah, that's how it's going to go.
I mean, they seem convinced, don't they? Fred Vasseur seems very convinced that this car concept can work for them and that there is definitely more performance to unlock. The problem is that they've been hampered by race situations where they've chewed up their tyres. They've not been able to find the setup window that they feel is going to extract performance out of the car. I think one comment he made was that the Ferrari is good in clear air, but we haven't seen the Ferrari in clear air except for qualifying right now. And in Charles Leclerc's hands, it's very capable. It's not as quick as Red Bull, but it's quicker than everybody else. It's just when you go beyond that one lap, when you're in a race scenario, Ferrari are nowhere near as quick. It's actually quite bad when you think about it, that compared to last season, their race pace in Jeddah and Bahrain has almost been identical. In a season where people have all made tangible gains, Ferrari seemingly had done as well, but they don't seem to be any better than they were, and then they're going backwards. So that is quite a worry for them.
I still think they're very much limited because of the reliability issues. I really do feel that if they were to understand what's causing the reliability issues, that would make life a lot easier. It reminds me a lot, actually, of quite a random one. It reminds me a lot of the 2014 Red Bull. They were having so many problems, and obviously with the age of new design, the Red Bull chassis and everything around it obviously is so tightly compact to, obviously for the sake of performance, that it was upsetting the reliability. So I do feel that Ferrari are going with, shall we say, a safe design in order to finish races. And I feel unless they figure out what's causing their reliability issues, they're always going to struggle to compete with Red Bull.
Yeah, very true. And as I said, I still maintain, one lap pace in Leclerc's hands. We know that Ferrari have the second best car in that regard. Can they recreate that on the Sunday? For the last year and a half, we haven't really seen that from Ferrari since they stopped winning races. They've always struggled with managing their tyres. There seems to be a fundamental issue with their car. They just can't unlock the performance, according to Fred Vasseur, that they need. There's been a lot of changes at Ferrari in his tenure as well. He's been there a short time. He has made some changes. This will take time to sort of manifest or, culminate some level of success that they're hoping for. So we'll have to wait and see on them. I suppose the ace in the deck is Charles Leclerc. If he can have a trouble-free weekend reliability-wise, hopefully we'll get to see him put a performance together that can extract some big points for Ferrari. Should have had a podium in Bahrain. He was massively hampered by his grid penalty for more reliability issues that he had in Jeddah. So, there's a big asterisk in terms of what he can deliver this weekend. And, Carlos Sainz needs to up his game as well. So there is room for improvement from Ferrari. I mean, there has to be. It can't be much worse at this point in time. We should move to Mercedes as well. As I said already, they've got a different but similar issue that they're not as fast as they'd like to be, but they seem convinced that it's not going to work with them with this car. But Mike Elliott was more optimistic, Courtney, wasn't he? He said that more upgrades come in and that should bring them further up the order. Is that enough in your mind to convince you that Mercedes can take the fight to Aston Martin and Ferrari? Or do you think Mike Elliott has his sights on a bigger prize, i.e. Red Bull, for example?
I don't think we're going to see any tangible gains until Imola. As I said before, if anybody can unlock an unbelievable amount of pace, it is Mercedes. But with this season, I don't quite know what to believe. There's so much chirping going on around the paddock about, like even Christian Horner was saying he expects there to be a steep development curve and expect the competition to catch up soon. I don't know whether this is genuine belief. I don't know if this is certain teams trying to motivate, their respective their teams, their fans to get behind, or even to promote the sport in general, because we know there's a lot of unhappiness that there's once again one team dominating the sport. So I think we are seeing a lot of promotion for the race weekends along with the build up. I hope it's true, obviously, but I don't only want to see Mercedes catch up. I want to see multiple teams catch up. There was we've been seeing a lot of talk. The moment a Mercedes fan complains about Red Bull dominating, oh, you're just unhappy because Mercedes aren't there. Of course, there is an element of that. But I love seeing the battles between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen at the beginning of last season. I was thoroughly disappointed to see it end. I don't want to be seeing just Mercedes catch up. Let's see Ferrari. Come on, it's been over 15 years now. Get your act together. Let's be seeing multiple teams getting in championship battles. This is what the pure F1 fans in us want to be seeing.
Yeah, I think for now, we just have to hope right now that Aston Martin, Mercedes and Ferrari can give us a bit more of a show. We were kind of robbed of that in Jeddah. I think the safety car coming out the way it did kind of put everybody into a tyre management mode where, there wasn't enough of an advantage really for anyone to make any headway. I mean, Leclerc was kind of stuck in that dirty air. He wasn't able to go up further. That safety car ruined his race in terms of progress. Hamilton was managing his stint on the mediums when he had more pace there. If he'd have known that the tyre wear was going to be as good as it was, maybe he could have been more of a thorn in Alonso and Russell's side. It just never really worked out for him. Same for Russell, really. He was kind of pegged back a little bit too. I want to talk a little bit about Russell and Hamilton, though. We saw in Jeddah a little bit of miscommunication going on between Russell and the pit wall regarding Alonso's penalties, but also, managing his race against managing his teammates' race. And we asked this in the last episode, is there a shift in the balance of power between Hamilton and Russell? And I think that there is a bit more power in Russell's camp in terms of his being able to influence decision-making than there used to be last season. That is something I think we'll be interested to keep an eye on as a subplot this weekend. I don't think Mercedes are worried about it too much, but I certainly think it might be on Sir Lewis Hamilton's mind that he may not be getting the rub of the green on his side of the garage as he would have expected. Is that something that you guys are worried about right now?
I'm not worried personally. I think Lewis has it in hand. As I said last week, I think a lot of it is contractual negotiation position from Lewis, because obviously he self-manages and how he's doing that. Maybe there's a bit of ploy from Mercedes, because for the rumours are that Lewis is obviously asking for more money, which every driver does when it comes to the contract. I mean, I would, if I was a 7-time world champion, I'd be asking for more money. I think both of you would be asking for more money if you come out for contract negotiation. So maybe it's a bit of political with Mercedes trying to drive down Lewis. We're going, look, we'll favour George. We took this with George for you to accept less money because we don't want to pay you that much. So I think it's a lot of internal politics that may be favouring George at the moment more than George taking a step up on Lewis. But Lewis is obviously not happy in the car right now, which obviously doesn't help his position either. At least that's my view on it.
No, I think that's a fair point. I'm not trying to drive a wedge between these two here or try to create a narrative where there isn't one.
God, a Ferrari van.
Yeah, that's what you've got to do to keep the show interesting. But everyone loves controversy. But, seriously, I do think there is something going on there. I think it's a slow burner, this one. I think we saw some of this last season. I think Zandvoort was a great eye-opener for this one, where George kind of went against what the team wanted him to do, called a strategy change, got the advantage ahead of his teammate and finished ahead of him in a race where he wasn't really anywhere near Hamilton. I mean, at one point, we thought Hamilton was going to win before Verstappen overhauled him and the safety car come out and everything that unfolded the way it did. I do feel that on a few occasions, and it's growing more and more common, we are seeing Russell not necessarily not play the team game. I don't want to say that it's happening because I don't think that's what's happening here. But something that we alluded to before with Russell, that for him to convince Mercedes that he is the future of this team post-Hamilton, he at some point needs to prove to them that he is either on Hamilton's level or that he's better than him, that they can trust him to take this team going forward. As good as Sir Lewis Hamilton is, he's not going to last forever. He's not going to want to go on forever. And over the next decade, Russell needs to be that guy for Mercedes. So I do feel that sometimes there are some coded messages going on, as we saw in Jeddah a little bit, where Russell was he was saying that he thought Alonso had a penalty, that's why he was managing his pace, when the reality was he knew Alonso didn't have a penalty to serve at the time. He just didn't want Mercedes to switch him in Hamilton because Hamilton was on better race ties. No fault of Russell's, because he was ahead of his teammate earlier on in the race and deserved to be there. I just think Russell is playing this long game with Hamilton. And with all the contract stuff going on, some of the comments that we saw in Jeddah where Hamilton was saying they didn't listen to me, and Toto said, well, you know, Hamilton's not stupid, but if we can't provide him a car good enough to win a championship, he may need to consider his options. There is a lot of this game playing or political stuff going on behind the scenes. I feel like right now it's a story worth keeping an eye on. As I said, I don't think there's no foul play going on here, but I do feel that this adds up to something that Russell may be trying to assert dominance in his team. And given the situation of Hamilton's future right now, Mercedes might be obliged to give him that license to do that, because right now they can only bank their future on him unless Hamilton signs on the dotted line to stay with the team.
I think Mercedes struggles are helping the dynamic between Lewis and George, because right now the rhetoric is, you know, we're working together to get, you know, the car and the team back where we feel we should be, which is competing for championships. So, you know, we saw it last season. Lewis was jeopardizing his raw race pace in order to experiment and, you know, to help bring the team forward. If Mercedes were to develop a race-winning car, I would be very intrigued to see how that dynamic goes, because a race-winning car, so we're seeing it countless times throughout the history of this sport. A race-winning car put so much jeopardy on the dynamic within the team. We saw Lewis and Nico Rosberg go from childhood friends to fierce rivals. So we know how quickly things can change. Look at Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. They loved each other in 2021. Since they developed championship-winning cars, the dynamic changes. So, yeah, it all depends. I feel the dynamic between Lewis and George all depends on the trajectory that this Mercedes goes on this year.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see how it plays out. And you're right, Courtney. I think when you're fighting for 4th and 5th in a race, it's not going to draw as many headlines as it would do if you're fighting for 1st and 2nd. But it's something for you guys. If you hadn't thought of it, or if you don't believe it's happening, it's worth keeping an eye on. You know, I might be wrong, but I feel like there's something going there. There's something brewing, and it could be a big story this season the longer it goes on. We'll have to wait and see. Certainly not going to go away, in my opinion. Let's move on to some of the other stories in the paddock. We've got McLaren now. Lando Norris. Very difficult start for the season for him. By far his worst start to an F1 season in his career. You know, it's his 5th season in F1 now, which is incredible given his young age and potential. And it's the first time after 2 races he hasn't scored any points either. And I think that's kind of the story, really, of how bad things have been for McLaren. There's a massive reshuffle that is going right now. We kind of alluded to this with their new technical department, post James Key, which is now moved on. They brought in David Sanchez at Ferrari. I think McLaren have also announced other people in this team. They've announced, I think it was Peter, sorry if I pronounce this wrong, Peter Prodromou and David Sanchez and Neil Holday as part of their 3-man specialist technical team. David Sanchez obviously is going to be on gardening leave with Ferrari till 2024, so he's going to be a later addition. But Zach Brown was saying as much as 15 people, I believe it is, 15 new members of staff will move straight across, whilst others will serve gardening leave. So a huge reshuffle in the technical department. And why this is relevant to Lando Norris is obviously right now, he's kind of at a crossroads really in not knowing what to do for his long to medium term future. Does he trust the McLaren team to go forward through his career? Are they going to give him a car good enough to compete for race wins and world championships? Right now, we seem to see McLaren announcing a new sponsor every other day, which of course is fantastic for them in terms of bringing that revenue in. But I'm sure a lot of fans are probably sitting there reading these stories thinking, okay, that's great, but this car needs to be faster. What is going on? So a big shake-up from McLaren there. How do you think that's going to transpire for them in the long term? Obviously, it's not a short-term fix right now because they're still waiting on this new car, but it does seem that they're trying to throw everything at this possible to not only convince Lando Norris to stay, but to try and preserve their position and make those steps going forward when all their rivals around them seem to be doing that while they're falling down the order.
Look, it's good that they're trying. I think I discussed it in last episode. I'm worried about McLaren as a team. I don't want to see them become the next Williams because what's happened with Williams, honestly, I think the F1 fans, the pure F1 fans in us, are really sorry to see what has become Williams. Even though they may step forwards, but seeing Williams finishing at the back of the grid, knowing what they achieved in the sport, is a real shame to see. And we wouldn't like to see that happen to McLaren. But at the same time, I don't know. I look at this and it almost, I don't know. It almost seems desperate what they're trying. They're just trying to do everything they can to bring the team forwards. I know this has been a bit of an Aston Martin love fest in this episode, but Aston Martin did it, in a quiet manner. They got the right people in. The pieces at this point seem to come together well. Whereas McLaren just sort of throwing the kitchen sink at it. And we've seen in the past, sometimes that doesn't always work.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, speaking of Aston Martin, I also forgot to mention McLaren are recruiting the head of aero, Mariano Alperin, from Aston Martin, who's head of aero at Sauber for 11 years, has a good career there. Plenty of experience at Aston Martin. I'm sure there'll be plenty of information he can use to help McLaren when he goes there. So I think you're right, Courtney. They are throwing the kitchen sink at this. I'm linking this to Lando Norris because his future's uncertain right now. And whilst a lot of teams are going to be keeping an eye on him, I think he's the most sought-after driver right now in F1 for all the big teams. McLaren need to do everything possible to convince him that this is the best place to be right now. As for this weekend, it's likely going to be another difficult weekend for them. The car is not great in the slow corners. It's going to be a homecoming for Oscar Piastri as well after many years of trying to get into F1. One Australian driver out in Ricciardo, another one in Piastri. So, Lee, can the Australian, the home fans, be optimistic of a good performance for Piastri and McLaren? Or is it one that they just have to take stock of the fact that the car's not great right now and just enjoy, the young lad having his home debut, I guess?
Right, I'm going to break the answer to two things. I think they can expect a great performance from Oscar Piastri. I don't think they can expect a great performance from McLaren. So he may perform brilliantly, have a great qualifying lap and qualify 17th, and then he retires with a 40 hydraulics. Yeah, I'm really not expecting much from McLaren this weekend. Not because Lando and Oscar can't deliver, which they can. I just really think the car is really underperforming. It's a really poor car. And I mean, I love McLaren. It's just a really shame to see them fall so far compared to last season. But yeah, I really feel like the throwing of the kitchen sink, as Courtney put it, is just about root cause back to 2013. And it's, as you said, Courtney said in the last episode, of they blame the car, they blame the design, they blame the engine, they've changed engines, they blame the engine, they blame the engine, they changed engine again, they changed the concept, obviously the rules have changed, they changed driver. And the car is amazing, but it's not amazing. It hasn't been since 2012. And it's, I know they've got to do steps to correct it, but I just think they're just doing it in a loud manner, which is very much Zach Brown of out and proud, although that's I'm not, it's not quite the correct statement for what I'm trying to say. But as Courtney said of the Aston Martin, it's quite steady steps where Zach is very much, we're doing this, look at this, look at that, and which is great for marketing, but not for racing.
No, I mean, McLaren, to their credit, they've realised that this isn't working out for them. They had hoped for better. Admittedly, that they've acknowledged that they were going wrong on this. They've decided to start again. It is going to take time, and I think that does coincide nicely with the infrastructure changes and improvements that they're going to have over the next couple of years. They do need to have their house in order to make this work. Right now, it seems that their best chance to return to the front and really compete for race wins and world championships is 2026. I think we established in the last episode that McLaren have regressed into a midfield team. I think they need to just accept that and look at moving forward in the same way that Aston Martin have, with those lofty ambitions that they've had. arguably with no worse facilities than what McLaren have had available to them as well, in all respects. So it's a big raft of changes. Lando Norris, they would hope, would be patient and see this project for what it is, and hopefully that he can trust it to go, to be what he needs going forward. We'll have to wait and see.
I do think he's going to replace Perez at Red Bull. It's just a case of when. I feel that's a move that we probably all expect to see happen at some point.
It will be interesting. I mean, part of me hopes he doesn't leave McLaren.
Yeah.
Because I think McLaren need him more than he needs them at the moment. With all due respect to McLaren, great team, and I hope that they return to the front. Nobody wants them to be struggling at the back. But right now, easily the best thing about them is Lando Norris. So we'll have to wait and see how that all goes down. Hopefully McLaren can find some short-term gains this season to bring them up in the midfield, and then they'll have to go from there with the raft of changes, the shake-up that they've had very recently to try and turn things around. So we'll have to keep an eye on that story. Let's now talk about some of the other midfield battles here. There's a huge congested midfield, really, where there isn't an out-and-out slowest car on the field.
No.
I think it's fair to say, which is great. I don't think we wanted to see anyone lag at the back. We thought it was going to be Williams, but they've made a big step going for Alpine. Much improved in Jeddah for Ocon and Gasly, although Gasly was quite consistent. P9 again, Ocon in P8. They seem to have stolen a march ahead of the other teams in the midfield, but we've got Haas doing okay. We've got Alfa Romeo doing what they're doing. They were good in Bahrain, not so good last weekend. Then we had AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda painfully finishing in P11 again. We'll have to wait and see if he can get in the points after 2 P11s this season so far, with arguably one of the meme moments of the season already on radio after Magnussen got that overtake on him late on. And unless I'm forgetting anyone else, I think I've covered all the others. I don't think I've forgotten anybody on this. Point being, midfield battle. Who do you think is going to be the surprise of this weekend in a good way? Who do you think is going to come out on top in this midfield battle between the likes of the Alpines, Haas's, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, and the Williams?
I think AlphaTauri will be looking to hit back. I think they'd be very disappointed with how it ended for Yuki Tsunoda, but I also feel that Alex Albon is always the one to keep an eye on. I really do feel that he's a star boy in that mix of teams that we've been talking about. Been really happy to see his progress at Williams after the way he left Red Bull. So I think Alex Albon could be the one to spring a surprise.
Yeah, I like that. And he had a good race last season, if I remember rightly. I can't remember if did he score points in Australia last year?
I think he scored a point, and he pretty much did. I'd say 95% of the race on one set of tyres.
Yeah, I mean, if we're wrong, let us know in the comments. But I feel like that sounds about right. I can't remember 100%, but that sounds about right. So, yeah, this could be a good race for Alex. Hopefully it is. Williams certainly making steps forward. They do look a better team, and James Vowles, his time there has gotten off to a good start. So hopefully Williams can continue to improve. Lee, who are you looking out for in the midfield this weekend? Of course, for argument purposes, we do need to include McLaren as well. We can't just write them off and say they're going to be rubbish. But they are going to be rubbish. Well, you might. I'm just putting it out there so that McLaren fans will say, you've got to include us too. Don't forget us. But
I'm a McLaren fan. They're going to be rubbish. I'm accepting it.
You know what, Lee? You sound like a West Ham fan, mate. It's like, and we know we are West.
You might see that in the Aussie crowd this weekend. There might be a sea of orange Piastri fans just, owning it. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not a West Ham fan, but I get your point. But I think for me, the driver is Pierre Gasly. I think it's going to be the driver that I really want to keep an eye on. Obviously, it's his third race. He didn't perform too badly, although out in Jeddah, although he fell behind Esteban compared to Bahrain, and I really want to see him see if he's taking that step up now. It's his third race, and if he can actually take the fight to Esteban. No discredit from him from Bahrain. But Bahrain, he was very much lucked into finishing ahead of Esteban because Esteban just threw it away through all the penalties. So I really want to see Esteban stepping that up and taking that fight to be the best of the rest.
Yeah, no, so fair enough. Let's move on to the bold predictions. Now, of course, if you are new to the podcast, we do our bold predictions for every race weekend where we give our top 3 in order and also a pole position prediction. And we also have a bonus part for the bold prediction of the weekend. Now, last weekend, Lee, you did very, very well. 5 out of 6. Yeah. You're only a Max Verstappen pole position away from completing a clean sweep. So, in the interest of fairness, I'm going to throw the baton over to you, mate. And if you give us your top 3, your pole position prediction, and we'll leave the bold predictions till the end, so that's out of risk of no one stealing them. But I'll let you go first on that one as well.
So just a pole position for now, or the top 3?
Top 3 in pole position, mate.
Okay, so pole position, I'm going to be boring, I'm afraid. It's going to be Max. Max, Sergio, and Charles.
And that's your top 3 as well. Courtney,
yep.
How about you, mate?
Yeah, I'm going to be boring as well. Max pole and the win. Sergio second, Alonso third.
I'm going to completely agree with you on that one and just go exactly the same. So Max pole to confirm, and then Max, Sergio, and then Fernando in P3. The most common podium that we've seen this season. I think it's going to see that again. 3 in a row. Bold predictions, guys. And now, for the interest of fairness, Lee, you can't have Perez winning as a bold prediction, even though you didn't make that prediction anyway. So you can't try to cover your losses there. I think we've had it once. I don't think that's going to be as bold a prediction. But we'll revisit later in the season, depending on how many races Max has won by this point. So let's come to you first. Bold prediction worth 2 points if you get it right. So you're going to give us another gem this weekend.
I may have already alluded to it in my prediction of the top 3, but I believe Charles will not only finish the race, not having reliability issues, he will get a podium. So it's a 2-factor of that he'll finish the race and get a podium.
You know, you're very quickly growing to be the Tifosi's favourite member of DNF1 now, which is quite a feat, because usually I like to try and be that one. But no, fair play. I'm sure they'll enjoy hearing that. Hopefully it comes in. No, you're my favourite member of the panel now. So,
thank you.
And that includes me, you know, just so that Courtney isn't worried about that. But Courtney, speaking of which, what's your bold prediction this weekend, mate?
I'm going to follow on with my Albon statement, and I think he's going to finish at least top 8. I feel that if a couple of the other teams, the Ferraris, the Mercedes, have a tough one, have various issues, I think Alex Albon's going to be the star boy, and he's going to mop up those points. He's going to say, "Thank you very much. I'll have those." And yeah, he's going to do the job for Williams this weekend.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. I am going to go really bold, and I'm going to say Stroll P4. Exactly P4 for Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin are going to be very good this weekend. And I think Stroll, assuming there's no reliability issues and how well he's been driving, I think we're going to see what he's capable of in this car. So I think he's going to finish P4. And it'd be fun to see him fight through the field. I think he did really well in Bahrain. And if he was 100% fit or feeling the way he does now, and he doesn't have any reliability issues, I think he's going to be quite good. So yeah, my bold prediction, Stroll in P4. So let us know, guys, some of your predictions for this weekend as well. And, of course, let us know your thoughts on the topics that we discussed heading into this weekend's Australian Grand Prix. We will not be doing a earlier review of this race because of the time difference. It's on 6 in the morning in the UK, so the review is going to be out Monday morning as always. But until then, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But as always, thanks for tuning in. Please stay safe, and we will see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. And remember, as always, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care, guys.
See you soon.
Goodbye.